Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2020 Rotoworld NFL Mock Drafts. I am your host, Paul Burmeister. Very much looking forward to the company of Rotoworld's finest when it comes to the NFL, and specifically draft analysis, Josh Norris, John Daigle, and Hayden Winks. You know them from watching them on YouTube/NBC Sports. They've been getting ready for this draft for the past few weeks, and this is kind of the crown piece for them, the mock draft, what they think will happen with all 32 picks. And I want to point out, before we get to know the guys here a little bit, this is what all three of them believe will happen on round one on draft night. It doesn't so much reflect their own opinions and what their rankings look like. This is what they believe each team will do with those 32 picks. So before we get into those picks, starting, of course, at number one with the Bengals, Josh, I'll let you start it out. I'd like to hear kind of the first thought on top of your head when it comes to this draft, this very unique draft prep, when compared to some of the other ones we've done together.
Yeah, first of all, Paul, lovely to have you. So glad you could join us and host this so I can get out of that chair for a little bit. Second, this is a wild and crazy draft process. It is different than any other that we have ever seen. And for a league that relies so much on trying to make the most educated decisions, relies so much on gathering information for months and months and months just for this 3-day event during the final weekend in April, it will be fascinating to me how that lack of information will impact draft picks and decisions, not just this year, but in the next 2 or 3 years once we look back. But just like every draft, this year certainly has positions at the top that are highly, highly talented, wide receiver, offensive tackle, and I'm sure we'll hit on many more throughout this exercise.
Yeah, I think there's two types of players that are going to be affected the most here. Players with injuries and then also the small school prospects. I think we're going to see probably a record amount of players that were invited to the combine to get drafted. I think it's going to be hard for Division II players to get drafted unless they really shined at the combine just because the scouts weren't at their facilities every weekend. So maybe a player like Laviska Shenault, who's had some injuries recently, obviously Tua Tagovailoa, he might slide a bit further than he otherwise would have in a regular draft.
The people were clamoring for more crossover. Little did they realize they were going to get Paul, Josh, and I dressing exactly alike on complete accident. But that's not why they're here. They're here for the draft. And I would argue, just simply from a fantasy football perspective, the number of receivers that could not only go in the first round, teetering on 6 or 7, but just the fact that they all could be superstar prospects. This class is so deep, and I believe it's going to be reflected the moment it starts on day one, Thursday night.
Before we get rolling with the picks, can you tell me what quarterback that is behind you on top of those 3 books that you have?
That is Texas A&M legend and
yes.
Browns not-so-legend, Johnny Manziel.
Johnny Manziel. Wow, we'll see what that
his crowning achievement actually is
is
winding up in the shot of John Daigle. That's probably the most pro success he's had. So,
Yep, sounds about right.
We'll see. If you give a first-round quarterback to a team, we're going to have to bring that up right there. And I also want to point out that I've got a little bit of black detail in the stitching up here. I'm not all blue. I'm a little bit different than you guys.
When in doubt, well, one, we're all a little bit blue right now, let's be honest. And 2, when in doubt, go Navy. That's what I always say to myself.
There you go. Can't go wrong, especially with how good we all look on these shots, right? Yes.
So glad it's not HD.
All right, NFL drafts. As for the drafts, 2020 Rotoworld NFL Mock Draft starts now. John, you get to make the Bengals selection. We're all excited for this night to come and to see what the Bengals do, but there's not a lot of angst involved here. What do you see happening?
There's no need to get cute at the top. The Bengals are taking Joe Burrow undoubtedly at number 1 overall. Maybe there would be a real discussion at the top if Tua Tagovailoa was actually healthy this year, but his medicals leave Burrow as the offseason's worst-kept secret. The numbers speak for themselves, right? 76% completion rate, 5,600 yards, 60 touchdowns, and 6 picks, and arguably the best passing performance in college football history. If you want to play devil's advocate, I guess we could cite his meteoric rise from undrafted prospect to franchise cornerstone, but this pick is all but submitted.
I agree, Daigle, and it's one of those positions where the Bengals just haven't seemed to have that player take them over the top since Carson Palmer. I will say, if we can sit in the camp of Joe Burrow here for a moment, I'm a little bit concerned of what level of success he could have as a rookie with this team. Obviously, he enters an organization with really good skill position players. You have A.J. Green, you have Tyler Boyd, you have Joe Mixon, maybe even John Ross can continue to develop. But that offensive line is just a massive question mark. And I know he enters a team with Jonah Williams, who they took as a first-round pick last year, missed the entire year. They took Billy Price the year before, has just not been a good pro. And after that, it's just a lot of questions. And we know how much, a quarterback likes to stay inside of structure, stay on script. And I'm a little nervous that Burrow won't have that, fortunate ability that a lot of other rookie quarterbacks have once they enter the NFL.
Yeah, and a player that plays in the pocket like Joe Burrow, the thing he needs the most is preparation. And with this offseason, we're not convinced that we're going to even have a training camp here. He's so good pre-snap, diagnosing coverages. He's got insane accuracy. I'm not doubting any of that. But in a regular offseason where he was able to get 3, 4, or 5 months in with his skill position players, I'd be a little more bullish than I am now.
One final point,
go ahead.
Because I mentioned that it's lovely to stay inside of structure, but while, Joe Burrow might not be the athlete that someone like Justin Herbert is, or, previous quarterbacks that we've seen in Kyler Murray and Lamar Jackson, he still loves to play off schedule. Like, he is one of those playmakers that can thrive when things go wrong. When everything else around him is disintegrating, he is the type of talent that elevates that and brings them out of that moment. And that's something you have to fall in love with when watching Joe Burrow.
We saw that in the big games. The last couple of games, you saw that was on display very much, as was the ability with those progressions so quickly to go from 1 to 2 to 3. And I know they don't track this, but the lack of poor decisions he made, if we could somehow keep track of that, I think he would only need both hands to count the number of times he made a poor decision in that entire season. Okay, so it's Joe Burrow. No surprise to the Bengals at 1. Josh, right back to you with the Redskins at 2.
Yep, Washington Redskins at number 2. Obviously, the Redskins will field tons of calls from maybe the Miami Dolphins, the Los Angeles Chargers, other teams in need of the quarterback. It certainly points to Washington not selecting a quarterback. And here we'll go back to Ron Rivera's foundation on the defense side of the ball and go with an edge rusher in Chase Young. The entire staff is made up of friends of Ron Rivera. And again, at his core, Rivera cares more about disruption than he does coverage. That's an ongoing debate right now in NFL circles, that if coverage is more important than getting after the quarterback. But what Chase Young does is he brings that athletic style and aggression from college football, that if you scheme him one-on-one against an offensive tackle, he gives you a chance to win and create disruption at any moment. And that's so difficult to find, a complete pass rusher whose game won at the college level and that easily translates to the NFL level.
Chase Young.
Go ahead.
Chase Young also sneakily sells tickets. He played high school football just 22 minutes down the road. And yes, the NFL and the Bengals in particular will prioritize quarterbacks at the top, but Young arguably is the number 1 overall prospect in this draft.
Yeah, when we're debating about Chase Young, it's like, how good of a prospect is he? I mean, we have 99th percentile production score. 21 TFLs, 16 and a half sacks. He's barely even 21 years old. He's got power moves. He's pretty agile for his size. I think he's a rare talent like Jadeveon Clowney. Even with the quarterback up in the air, I would still go Chase Young here.
And Paul, one final point here. This is Chase Young, who's going to be possibly the number 2 overall pick. He possibly joins a defense that has Daron Payne, who was a first-round pick, Montez Sweat, who's a first-round pick, Jonathan Allen, first-rounder, Ryan Kerrigan, first-rounder, Brian Anderson, second-rounder, Fabian Moreau, third-rounder. Landon Collins got a big free agent contract. I can keep going down the list. This better be one of the best defenses in the NFL in 2020, or else there are issues immediately for a Ron Rivera coach team.
And one issue on the other side of the ball, why they need to be so good there, Josh, they were last in scoring offense a year ago. So it would help if the defense was strong once again this year. Top quarterback, top edge rusher off the board, 1 and 2. Bringing us to the Lions at 3. Hayden, the selection is yours.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Jeffrey Okudah, the cornerback of Ohio State. He's an elite player. The only thing that has me a little bit nervous is if the Chargers or the Dolphins or somebody else trades up for this pick. But I think the Lions should be wanting to do that. I think that they move down 2 or 3 spots, they can still get Jeffrey Okudah. I don't think the Giants would select him with the 4th pick. So I think the Lions have every incentive to trade down. I'm less convinced that one of the other two quarterback needy teams are going to actually trade up. But Jeffrey Okudah, the prospect himself, I think we're looking at an elite prospect. He's super lengthy. His athletic profile, maybe he doesn't have the elite 40-yard dash time, but was an elite explosive athlete. So I would be very happy if I was a Lions fan here.
Jeffrey Okudah,
Josh,
yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, Josh, I have a question based off of the Unbuttoned podcast I did with Chris Sims yesterday. And Chris believes that Jeffrey Okudah is not the first or second best cornerback.
Yeah.
He rolled him out there as the third best, which, hey, I'm all ears when I talk to Chris. I know he does the studying, but that was a little bit different, or quite a bit different, than most of the other analysts I listen to who have him one or maybe two. Are you hearing at all that maybe Okudah will not be the first corner off the board?
Yeah, that's a little bit of the buzz right now, right? That maybe some teams have C.J. Henderson early, or even one of these other cornerbacks. And Paul, I was actually going to bring that up. Like, I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position where you have to speak for Chris, but you were involved in that podcast.
Yeah.
So I'd love to kind of hear your side of that equation, because I tuned in for the first half of it. And what I heard was that Chris was a little bit worried about, one, Jeffrey Okudah's long speed, which was a 4.48 40, and that, that's not closer to 4.3 or 4.4 that C.J. Henderson or A.J. Terrell out of Clemson did. But what I can present to you is that, one, the 40 is just one test of an athletic profile, right? You also have to include jumps. He did not participate in his agility scores, but also what Jeffrey Okudah offers is, an inch longer arms. He has the size. He has a projected athletic profile in the 99th percentile. So athleticism, from my perspective, it's not something that I would be concerned about at all in Jeffrey Okudah's evaluation here.
Yeah, I was not nearly as caught up in the 40 time. And to me, I look at really any position, unless it's a couple standard deviations off of what it should be, I don't worry about it too much. So the fact that he was in the mid to high 4.4s, if it was a 4.61 or a 4.59, I might have been worried. But the 40 time didn't worry me at all. And in addition to what you heard about what Chris said about Okudah, he also mentioned that he thought he was he appeared to be like the most developed right now, the best coached. Like he was closer to what he perceived to be the finished product when compared to Terrell and also Henderson. And I think that bothered him a little bit. And he did follow up and put a period on this by saying, hey, I still think he's great value in the teens. I'm not down on Jeffrey Okudah. I don't think he's a bad pick. I think he'd be a wonderful pick, 15, 16, 17. This is what Chris had to say. I just don't see the best cornerback in this draft.
It's also, we're at that point in the calendar right now is where we don't know what to believe, right? Like for so long, for months and months, we heard that Jeffrey Okudah was maybe the top defensive talent in this entire draft class. And now as we get closer, maybe teams are starting to leak information, or scouts are starting to get, a little restless and want to share what they've heard in the media. And that's why, you hear maybe the Lions dropping back or the Falcons moving up for one of these C.J. Henderson types. At the end of the day, all are talented players, right? They all are. And you just have to figure out which ones you like the best. But even saying all that, I would be surprised in the end if Jeffrey Okudah is not the first corner off the board.
And I know another knock against this pick for the Lions would be that they're just recycling their players, trading Darius Slay and then bringing another player in. But one, the Lions would be extremely thrilled if Okudah played like Darius Slay. And two, it's obviously about the cap situation. He's not going to get $16+ million in his rookie year, even the first 4 or 5 years of his contract. So it's just all about manufacturing their cap space as well.
We can move on then to the fourth pick, Giants. John, this one is yours.
It's probably a little bit of a curveball here, but I'm leaning Jedrek Wills at the moment. This year, more than ever, teams will be relying on personal connections given the limitations at facilities. So while Tristan Wirfs is a suitable candidate to be picked here, I just looked at Joe Judge's personal connection with Nick Saban, who the Giants can just call and ask about Jedrek Wills since he started for Alabama the past 2 seasons. Wills played exclusively right tackle in both high school and Alabama. And that's where Cameron Fleming, who the Giants signed this year, to start at right tackle under Jason Garrett. However, Cameron Fleming only played 13 of a possible 490 snaps at right tackle the past 2 years with the Cowboys. So Wills can step in immediately after allowing only 1 sack all of last year and start from day one.
Yeah, I mean, it would be stunning if the Giants do not address the offensive line here. One, because Dave Gettleman is Dave Gettleman, and he absolutely loves his hog mollies. But two, it's also the strength of the draft in this period of where teams are selecting. The Jedrek Wills one is interesting, Daigle, because you mentioned it. He played just right tackle. And that's not to say that right tackles aren't important. In fact, I think they're as equally important as left tackles. And obviously contracts dictate that right now. But one, I think Dave Gettleman is a very traditional mind. And two, there are some other players here that have spent time on both sides of the offensive line. Tristan Wirfs is an example. Mekhi Becton is an example. And I always go back to what Dave Gettleman said when he was in charge of the Carolina Panthers, and how, only so many of tackle prospects have left tackle feet. They have the athleticism. They have that ability to work on an island, a pass pro island. And if there's any offensive tackle I can point to in this class that has that, is Tristan Wirfs. But like you said, it is absolutely a loaded class at the top of this position, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if any of these offensive tackles come off the board here at number 4.
Yeah, with Jedrek Wills, he's allowed 1 sack on 970 pass pro reps at Alabama. I mean, 1 sack in 1,000 reps. That's insane. He also gets after it in the run game. I think he checks all the boxes. He's a 74th percentile athlete. I think he would be the pick. The only thing is, would they be eyeing Isaiah Simmons possibly, or one of these other tackles? But if I was selecting a tackle here, it would be Jedrek Wills.
I have seen Isaiah Simmons to the Giants in a few mock drafts. However, as Josh pointed to, we know Gettleman is a traditional human being. He is not impressed by the fact that Simmons can play 9 different positions.
Mm-hmm. And for everybody, all these other teams who want an offensive tackle in the first round, the good news for them, 1 is off the board, but it's seen as a strength, as you guys have pointed out in this class. So I would expect 3, maybe 4 more to come off the board. Okay, it's not that the first 4 picks weren't exciting. You guys had good reasoning for them. But the 5th pick is really, to many, where this draft really begins. It's been the most discussed pick, not only the top 10, but really of the entire draft. The Miami Dolphins at 5, and what will they do at quarterback? Which one do they like the most? Or maybe even they don't go quarterback, which would be a giant shock. Josh, the Dolphins at 5. What do you think?
What an honor. First, this Dolphins team has been building to this moment for basically the last 365 days, right? Like, they have acquired draft capital by dealing some of their best players offensively, Laramie Tunsil, Kenyon Drake, just to have more draft selections. So we're going quarterback here. But who? Like, so much buzz has linked them to, obviously, Tua Tagovailoa for weeks and months and almost a year. But then there's Justin Herbert as well. I'm going to stick by it and go with Old Faithful in some ways and go with Tua here. And I understand that we led this mock draft by saying, like, look, this is an unreal draft process. Who knows how much information teams have on these players? And obviously with Tua, he's coming off this hip injury. And, no team likes to be first in taking that risk and that next step. And a team's going to with this hip surgery because it's not a shoulder, it's not a knee, it's something new. But if you consider Herbert safe, just because he doesn't have that injury history, I would push back and say, if you draft the wrong quarterback, you're going to be back in this situation in 2 to 3 years. And the wrong quarterback might also be because of his play. I just feel much safer picking a style of player like Tua Tagovailoa at this point in the draft based on his play on the field alone.
I have Tua as my I have Tua as my 2nd ranked player and Herbert as my 5th ranked player. I do believe the Dolphins will be picking Justin Herbert here over Tua just for the medical reasons. And for those people that like to gamble on this stuff, you can find Tua bets, him sliding to 6 or sliding beyond that with pretty plus odds. So that would be my one draft prop bet that I would go after right now.
Hey, Josh, I know you well enough to know that you spent a lot of time with this pick. You probably went back and forth over the last couple of weeks or maybe even the last couple of months. So I know you're okay with this, but playing devil's advocate on this one is way too easy. So I'm going to do it here a little bit. Hey, Justin Herbert is more talented. He's more experienced, and he's less injured. Talk about a safe pick. Why not go there?
Because I think on the field, he's not as safe. Like, I understand that he has the tools, right? He has the arm, he has the athleticism, but far too often I see him lock onto that primary read. Far too often I see him not be able to understand what the defense is showing to him and pick the right receiver out. Far too often I see when things go poorly around him, he lacks this playmaker mentality. He lacks this want to lift everyone else up around him. And while Tua, yes, does have the injury, and yes, has this like innate want to hold on to the football, like for that extra moment and that extra tick, which leads to big hits in the pocket. I absolutely see him work off his primary to his secondary to his tertiary read. I see him make plays by himself to elevate the people around him. And I will always go back to that. And one, Paul, I don't have to be the one making the decision. I just get to sit here next to my kitchen and not, potentially ruin a franchise with this selection. So.
Very clean kitchen, by the way, too.
Thank you.
That is nice. I know you picked it up. But that's exactly what I wanted to hear. I think you did a nice job initially, but, when I came back at you, you had good reasons and good conviction for why you like Tua over Herbert, and that's all we can ask for.
Dago, any follow-up thoughts here? Because, this Dolphins team, once again, has been building towards this moment. And, once again, if they pick the wrong one, they might be in the exact same spot in 2 or 3 years.
It still seems like a toss-up. However, I will note Miami's beat writers have been all over this the past couple months, and all signs so far still seem to point to Herbert. And who knows, that could be last-minute fireworks, smoke screen, just to make sure teams aren't jumping ahead of them. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. We're all waiting for the 5 and 6 turn on Thursday night next week for sure.
5 in the books, bringing us to number 6. And I think you paved the way there very well, John, because the Chargers at 6 also have big-time quarterback questions. Mm-hmm. We always have games of poker at this time of year, and Anthony Lynn up to this point is leading us all to believe, hey, I like Tyrod Taylor. We'll see what Tom Telesco does coming up next week with the 6th pick. But he cannot have Tua Tagovailoa because Josh just gave him to the Dolphins, but he could have Justin Herbert at 6. Hayden, what do you think?
Yeah, it's the no-brainer pick here. It's got to be Justin Herbert out of Oregon. And there's even a chance that Justin Herbert's higher on the Chargers board over Tua. I know one of the scouts there, and he said that Justin Herbert has been on their radar for not just this season, but for multiple seasons. And Josh has alluded to this multiple times before. He fits the culture there perfectly. And I'm going to echo exactly what Josh was saying earlier. It's the decision-making and a little bit of the accuracy that's preventing Herbert from being discussed as like a top 2, top 3 player here. But the arm talent's there. The athleticism's there. He's experienced. He's a good player on and off the field. It's just, can he fix up those like little inconsistencies, and then he can be a franchise quarterback.
Yeah, I'm an absolute lunatic. So every year I go back and watch every single post-draft press conference. And what stands out to me is what Tom Telesco said after drafting Joey Bosa at number 3 overall, a pick that a lot of people didn't project at the time. He said that he's basically had Joey Bosa on his draft board for 2 seasons and has just been waiting for the chance to draft him. Now, fast forward to this NFL Combine, when Kim Jones of NFL Network is on the field saying that she has talked to a decision maker in the NFL, saying that not only does he have Justin Herbert as the number 1 quarterback in the 2020 draft, he also had him as the number 1 quarterback in the 2019 draft. If I have to guess at which team that is, it is Tom Telesco wanting in the offensive version to draft his Joey Bosa at quarterback, and that is Justin Herbert. Again, that's like dot connecting and red yarn, like being from here to here to here. But sometimes we have to try to connect these dots, and I wouldn't be surprised if Herbert is the number 1 quarterback on the Chargers board.
All right, John, you're the one guy who didn't get to pick Tua or Justin. You want to put a bow on those 2 picks at 5 and 6 before we move on to 7?
It's going to be one or the other, and they're going to flip-flop. I can't imagine either team pulling away from those 2 names. And the Chargers are in position to just sit back and take the one that falls to them. But
Paul, like, what if it's not, right? Because what if Anthony Lynn really does get to run this organization from a quarterback standpoint? Yeah. And it is Tyrod Taylor. That's a little frightening to me. And I like Tyrod as a quarterback. Yeah. But you have this team that is kind of built to win right now.
Yeah.
You have great defensive talent in Joey Bosa, Melvin Ingram, Derwin James, Casey Hayward, so on and so forth. You have great wide receivers in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Can a team really sit here and be in a position to take a quarterback and not select one, because that potentially just windows their 1 to 2 years right now of winning in the NFL? I don't believe a team can do that and kind of self-sabotage themselves in that way.
I see the Chargers the exact same way you do, Josh. I mean, I think they ought to take whatever quarterback is left there, whoever they had. Maybe Miami takes the one they had second and they get there first. But the point is, I don't think they're going to take a quarterback, to what you're saying. I have one source inside that organization I trust 100%, and he does not think that they will take a quarterback. So I'm going with that. I don't think it's in their best interest to bypass one of those two guys, but I think they're going to go elsewhere and see what they can do with Tyrod Taylor.
Is it a right tackle or left tackle, or do you know the position at all?
I do not have the actual position of the pick. I've had the discussion about quarterback within that building, and this person believes that's not going to happen. So
tackle's a good shout, because obviously they just traded Russell Okung for Trey Turner. And again, this is the position in the top 10 where talent meets whole. And obviously a left tackle could be coming off the board right here as well. Paul, that's interesting.
Okay, 1 through 6 in the books. Let's move on to number 7, the Panthers' first pick of the Matt Rule era. John, what do you got?
Don't screw it up.
As Josh said, talent meets whole. So what better way to replace Luke Kuechly than to jump on Isaiah Simmons, adding a laboratory-crafted athlete who not only played linebacker, safety, edge, even nickel corner in some packages under Dabo Swinney at Clemson, but who also gets excited about filling gaps and seeking contact when he hunts down, because that's what he does. He's not prey, he's predator. He hunts down opposing ball carriers. Isaiah Simmons isn't every front office's cup of tea, given his all-around play, but you couldn't dream up a better fit for not only the caliber of player he is, but for the Panthers and Matt Rule's sports science program that is being built. He's just a defensive franchise cornerstone that I think they will jump at the opportunity to grab.
I agree with you, Daigle. They're in a position right now where I kind of think the offensive line is set maybe outside of, a second or third round selection. And obviously the offense is set beyond that. But the defensive side of the ball, I don't know if they have 11 starters on the roster right now. It was one of the worst defenses in the NFL in 2019, and arguably has gotten even worse during the 2020 offseason. And while I think Isaiah Simmons would thrive on a much better football team, because that would allow him to be used in numerous situations and kind of be that little cherry on top of the cake to really take a team over. Obviously, a team doesn't think that they are just who they are in 2020, and they can build beyond that. So I think Isaiah Simmons will make plenty of plays alongside Shaq Thompson as a rookie, but when the team becomes fantastic and has, coverage that matches the disruption up front and just allows Isaiah Simmons to fly around at the second level and line up for multiple alignments, that's when he's going to be at his best.
Josh, take off the analyst hat now for a second and just be a fan. This is your hometown, okay? Mm-hmm. So go ahead and just be the fan who wants the Panthers to win. Do you like this pick? Is it a good one?
I think, you'd have to rewind if that's the case, because I don't like what the Panthers are building right now from a standpoint where I think that their ceiling is capped at 8-8. I would have much rather them taken this Miami Dolphins path of spending a year and of trying to acquire as much draft capital as possible. But we mentioned that Los Angeles Chargers trade, right? They sent one of their best offensive linemen, the Panthers did, for a 30-plus-year-old left tackle. And now this is a team that signed Teddy Bridgewater to basically a 2-year contract and, added skill position players around him. This is not a process. This is not a build. They are trying to be good in 2020. I don't think that they can be good in 2020, and they might wind up in this purgatory state for the next couple of years. And I think that's a little dangerous. That's exactly where you don't want to be in the NFL.
Yeah, I think the timeline between the general manager and the head coach, I mean, they're working on 2 different paths here, and that's a problem. You got to get everyone on one direction. I do want to say Isaiah Simmons is from the area. I think that you can get behind the hometown hero here. And how I see Simmons is he's just going to be he's going to defend the tight end. He's going to defend the running back. He can spy against a rushing quarterback. He's just going to be that weapon that's going to take away your best non-receiver player. And I think it's a good first step. I don't think that you're going to be winning Super Bowls in the next 2-3 years here. I think you need to really rebuild this thing from the bottom.
You think of defense in Carolina the last few years. You think of Ron Rivera. You think of Luke Kuechly. They're both out of the building now. So Isaiah Simmons, in addition to being a wonderful athlete and guy who produces on the field, maybe could be the face of that defense if it goes that way at number 7. Number 8, Arizona Cardinals. Josh, this one is yours. It would make sense either way. You make a pick on offense and help Kyler Murray in his development. I see that defense, though. They gave up more total yards than any other team in the NFL last year. So I won't argue against defense either here, number 8.
Sure. It's an offensive-based league, though, so we're always going to go back to that, right? Like the number one goal of the offseason for Steve Keim was to find talents equal to Kyler Murray on offense. So he wouldn't have to like continue to lift everyone like he had to do as a rookie. And I think we're actually underrating Kyler Murray's rookie season, by the way, just a little tangent. The team is in a perfect position to fill that right tackle spot. And while Daigle earlier on picked Jedrek Wills to the New York Giants, I think you can slide your boy, Paul Burmeister, here to the Arizona Cardinals at number 8 in Tristan Wirfs. Tristan Wirfs, coming out of Iowa, I believe was one of the few freshmen ever to start for that prolific offensive line factory. He's someone that has the best athletic profile in this class among offensive linemen and has experience to take over that right tackle spot and would be fantastic in Cliff Kingsbury's run-oriented, scheming offense that is able and asking him to get out in the open field. So Tristan Wirfs here, number 8 to the Arizona Cardinals.
It made sense to pin a CeeDee Lamb or Jerry Jeudy to this team prior to the DeAndre Hopkins trade, but that arguably shored up that need in their air raid scheme. Offensive tackle here is absolutely the right call.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of buzz linking the Cardinals to Derek Brown here, and I looked at Josh's rankings here. It's a little too early for me as well, but we'll get to Derek Brown later. I would love to see the offensive tackle be the pick here. I can see them going to more floor receiver sets this year where you're not going to have a tight end next to a tackle. You need to really shore up those positions if you want to go do that.
Paul, what did you think of watching Wirfs so much this year? Because while, again, he tested fantastically, has so much experience, I was left like with wanting a little bit more when watching him. Like he has a lack of balance at times. He overextends. He falls on the ground. And again, that's a little concerning with how much experience he already has.
Yeah. My number one impression of him, Josh, is I happened to be back in Iowa City early August last year, and I went over to a practice, and it was lucky for me. It was a full speed, full go, fully padded practice, so I really got a good look at the team. And you know how it is when you're watching a practice. Certain things athletically will just stand out, whether it's someone's speed or a quarterback really throwing the ball. You watch an offensive lineman get after it. And my number one athletic impression, and I didn't really know him before this, was watching Tristan Wirfs in one-on-ones. I started out watching the quarterbacks, and I was kind of paying attention to what was going on over my right shoulder. And I wandered down there and watched a few reps, and I said to Kirk, I said, what do we have here? And he's like, yeah, that's the next one. That's our next first-round offensive lineman. So I hear what you're saying on some of the inconsistency during the season on film. Athletically, though, and I go back to what Chris Sims talks about a lot as traits. I want elite traits at that position, whatever position it is, in round one, and this guy's got it all. And, he was well coached there under Kirk at Iowa. So that's my number one thought when it comes to Tristan.
Just to put a bookend on that, if we value athleticism for edge rushers and interior disruptors because they're getting after the quarterback, why wouldn't we also value athleticism for offensive linemen, right? It's one of the few one-on-one matchups on an NFL field. And if he's asked to hold up on an island in pass protection like Wirfs is going to, if he's a top 10 selection here, then he should be an athlete. And yeah, I'm with you. Like those inconsistencies, I think that they can be coached out. Not that he was coached poorly, but that, more time goes along with it. You can develop as a player. So,
well, he's young. He's awfully young. So there's a lot of good football left in him. Wherever he is now, the ceiling is going to be much, much higher. Jaguars at number 9. They'll be busy in the first round. Their general manager, Dave Caldwell, will have another pick later. But at 9, Hayden, what do you see?
Yeah, I think they would love to see the board how it is right now. 8 of their last 10 first and second round picks have been from the SEC. They have holes at defensive tackle and corner. So you're looking at Derek Brown or CJ Henderson here. I'm going to go with Derek Brown. I don't see Derek Brown sliding too much further than this, even if he gets here. And I think CJ Henderson's this is like the first pick he can go as high. But yeah, with Derek Brown, you're getting a disruptive player. He wasn't an elite athlete. He was even more of an average athlete. He wasn't an elite producer, but when you watch him on tape, he's just so strong. The burst is there. The chase is there. I can see one of these teams easily falling in love with him as a top 10 pick.
I'm a little nervous of Derek Brown, to be perfectly honest with you.
I am too.
Like if we just talked about athleticism for offensive linemen and defensive linemen and edge, it's concerning when Derek Brown posts, a bad athletic profile, a below average athletic profile. Now, is it fair for us, because he did go through the NFL Combine workouts and, 50% of his peers did not, for us to compare his to other people's who did not, say like a Javon Kinlaw? That's a discussion that we have to have at some point. But, Derek Brown in college is this bulldozer of a human being. Like, he wants to go through you consistently, and he did that consistently at the college level. But I'm a little nervous that if that game translates to the pros when he's just a below average athlete, and if he doesn't have the juice, and you need to have the juice in order to consistently disrupt on the interior. But then the other question is, do the Jaguars care? And I'm not sure if they do care. So I agree with you that he's going to be the number 9 overall pick here.
The pros are that he didn't miss a single tackle all year last year, which is a crazy stat. And he's unblockable as a pass rusher. But the fact when you watch him on film that he does, for whatever reason, end up on his back, probably a little too often for a top 10 pick, that is the scary part of Brown's game.
Okay, that brings us to the first 9 picks here, guys. Number 10, obviously, is up next, the Cleveland Browns. And just a little bit big picture here, as I look at 10, 11, 12, I see 3 teams that the way I see them could really use help at wide receiver. Wide receiver is seen as the strength of this year's class, and we have not seen a single receiver go off the board here through 9 picks. John, number 10, Cleveland. It's all you.
Fortunately for the teams behind the Browns, they don't need a wide receiver, right? The Browns need a premier left tackle, and that's why we are picking Andrew Thomas with the number 10 overall pick. Thomas didn't move to left tackle at Georgia until his sophomore year, but still took home back-to-back first-team All-SEC honors in those 2 seasons. The big 4 tackles in this class, a few who we've already mentioned, have special attributes and traits. But I would argue Thomas is the safest option among those 4 after allowing just 5 sacks in 3 years in college and being more than ready to excel as a true road grader in any run game, particularly Kevin Stefanski's and the Browns, the moment he gets drafted with them.
I think Georgia had the best offensive line in the country last year, and I think Andrew Thomas was the best offensive lineman at Georgia. It's that simple. And, pass pro is not passive. And Andrew Thomas is someone who wants to be the hammer in every single situation. And once again, just who could have thought, John Daigle, that the major need of the Cleveland Browns right here has maybe potentially the number 1 left tackle in the next 2 to 3 years from this draft class, and Andrew Thomas fall to them. I love this pick.
Yeah, for me, he has 97th percentile arms, which is obviously a big thing for our offensive tackles. He has 71st percentile athleticism. I would be kind of surprised if the Browns didn't go Mekhi Becton. They're just such an analytical team, and Mekhi Becton, with being such an explosive athlete for his size, I would be interested to see if they're going to pick Becton, who's kind of a more upside player. I don't think as safe as Andrew Thomas, or even try to trade down here, attack one of these tier 2 offensive tackles. I mean, they're in a good spot regardless, though.
Paul, you watched all of these guys and also did the show with Sims mentioning all of them. Did you have a lean between the 3 we've already talked about in Wirfs, Wills, and Andrew Thomas, something that deciphers all of them?
Well, I mean, I'm obviously going to go to the one I know the best, and that's Tristan Wirfs, because I watched him work out. And physically, it's hard to imagine someone better. My number 1 offensive tackle thought is, when it comes to the first round, wasn't so much the difference between the top 3, whatever those 3 are. It's that those teams that are in the back half of the first round that would like an offensive lineman are going to have someone quality there waiting for them with 5 with such high grades. So I can't help you quite as much on the difference between the three that have been selected. My top thought is just that someone who needs one later on in the first round is going to have an opportunity to grab one of quality because that's how strong the class is.
And Paul, to cap that, I mean, we had three in the top 10. There's a potential for 4 to go in the top 10, 5 to go in the top 10. Like you said, Mekhi Becton out there. You have some other – Isaiah Wilson's going to climb up the board. And we mentioned teams, like the Chargers could potentially take them. The Jacksonville Jaguars could potentially take one. So it would not be a shock at all if we have even more tackles than 3 go in the top 10 in this class.
Yeah, so not a shock at all for all those reasons that offensive tackle was the most popular pick in our mock draft here. 3 went in the top 10 and some very good ones, as we talked about, still out there. Okay, Jets at 11 with every single receiver still on the board. I'm advocating for Sam Darnold here a little bit, Josh. What do you think?
Well, you should. And I've actually been shocked when putting out mock drafts and putting out tweets that so many Jets fans want them to continue to add to that offensive line. I mean, I think that they tried to do their best to fill that need in free agency, right? Adding a George Fant, a Greg Van Roten, a Connor McGovern. But they really haven't done a good job at all of putting playmakers around Sam Darnold. That's why I want to give them CeeDee Lamb out of Oklahoma here, a player who I think has a very similar evaluation to someone like DeAndre Hopkins, who wants to be the alpha in every single moment in his routes, at the catch point, after the catch. He's absolutely spectacular. And when you look at this Jets roster, like, ask yourself, who is like the playmaker on it, right? Like, who is going to make the play? And I'm not even saying on the offensive side of the ball. I'm saying on the defensive side of the ball as well. And that's a concern. You know, like, they spent money on Le'Veon Bell. Well, he's dependent on his offensive line. CJ Mosley missed most of his first season with the Jets. Quinn Williams did nothing as a rookie. I mean, go down the list. And right now those wide receivers are Rashad Perryman. It's Jamison Crowder. Like, those are good role players. Let's get that number 1 target that hopefully Sam Darnold can continue to develop and grow with, and Lamb would be the perfect selection here at number 11.
Just because he turns every play into a jailbreak screen doesn't mean he's only a screen receiver. I mean, the king of separation among this class, 11 yards after the catch, which was the tops among all of the combine invite wide receivers. He's just a true yards after the catch king. And yeah, he's a great pick.
Yeah, I mean, when you average 15.1 yards per target as a 20-year-old, you're going to be pretty good. So I think this is the right pick. He balances out that receiver core. Jamison Crowder can handle underneath. Rashad Perriman can take the lid off the top. And then you need that alpha receiver, and CeeDee Lamb does that better than Jerry Jeudy, in my opinion.
It's actually slightly disappointing because I would like to see him with Chris Sims' boy, Shanny, in San Francisco, but we'll work with him under Adam Gase. We'll see what we can do.
San Francisco coming up soon here, guys. The Niners pick at 13, but before that, 12. The Raiders, first of 2 first-round selections for them. They'll be back again at 19. But, Hayden, you have them right here at 12.
Yeah, and I think this is just going to be Jerry Jeudy. I think we're going to see the run on wide receivers here in the early teens right before it. And I think he also balances out this receiver core. Hunter Renfrow underneath. Tyrell Williams is the top guy. And then Jerry Jeudy is working somewhere in between. I have a little bit of a gap between CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy just off of kind of the explosion factor that you get with CeeDee Lamb. I think he's a little bit better at the catch point as well. But I don't want to nitpick Jerry Jeudy too much. I think Chris Sims left him out of the top 5, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's too good. He's been productive for too long. I'm not as concerned with the speed. I don't think it's great, but I think it's more than good enough. And I think he can beat press coverage off the line of scrimmage. The only concern I have is maybe he's a little weaker than you'd like, but that's totally fine.
I think Jerry Jeudy is on that spectrum of player of Calvin Ridley to Stephon Diggs, a player that creates separation and sustains it and then tries to win after the catch. But that's quite a large spectrum, right? Because Calvin Ridley, hasn't been asked to be a wide receiver or a alpha one, I should say, in the NFL. Meanwhile, Stephon Diggs is obviously a super complete player and runs probably the best routes and creates the best separation in the NFL. Paul, I want to pick your brain again because, your old friend, Mike Mayock here is in charge of the Las Vegas Raiders draft room. From your years, maybe even a decade with Mike, what were the top traits that he looked for at wide receiver? And maybe we could pinpoint one if it's not Jerry Jeudy.
Yeah, I think at wide receiver for Mike, it doesn't really I don't think it's that much different than any other position. Mike likes toughness. He likes production, and he wants to get to know somebody, which is different this year as opposed to last year's, and find out how much they really love and value football. And, within the wide receiver position, there are going to be nuances that he's not looking for, obviously, in a defensive lineman. But that's what Mike wants to see. Are you tough? Were you productive? And once I really get to know you, do I believe you're going to be great in the locker room? Do I believe that you love football and are really, really going to work at it the way the sport demands that you work at it? I think in the abstract, looking at wide receiver, and I talked about this with Chris, and removing Mike and the Raiders from it, although I'm sure, look at their roster, they probably are thinking they'd love to have a wide receiver at some point. This class is so deep that your initial reaction is, boy, there are going to be so many guys go right away in the first round. Maybe it's so good in rounds 3 and round 2. Maybe a GM's thinking, I can get a starter at the end of the second round. I don't want to use my first-round pick on a receiver because I can get a really, really good player much later on. It might, in a kind of reverse psychology kind of way, this really strong class may not have as many guys go in the first round because there's so much depth that the GMs are relying on later on.
Paul, it's a good point because, there are other positions in this class that aren't like that. And I would point to defensive tackle. I think there's a drastic drop-off between the top 2 defensive tackles in this class, and that also maybe lines up as a need or an area where the Raiders want to strengthen despite some of their offseason moves, obviously adding someone like Malik Collins. But, maybe Mike and John look at this draft board and say, okay, we have this clump of wide receivers of 3 or 4 that we evaluate similarly. But after, say, Javon Kinlaw, who's still on the board here, it's a cliff. So why not take the defensive tackle and then rely on our second first-round pick at number 19 to then take the wide receiver that's still there?
I think that cliff and that drop-off, or maybe you call it a gap, no matter what the position is, has so much to do with what teams do in the first round. Because if you look to the second and third, if you're a GM and you're like, well, you know what? Our 11th best wide receiver in this class could start for us in the slot. Like, he's that good. But the drop-off from the second to the third corner is massive. Maybe you like the receiver more, but you don't the drop-off affected by later on. I think that's something that comes into play.
And not just the 11th wide receiver in this class. It might be like the 22nd wide receiver in this class for the Raiders. Like, they are struggle city at that position. So,
and I will quickly note that NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah who is annually an accurate mock drafter, has reportedly been on top of the Broncos trying to move to this position because they covet Jerry Jeudy so highly. So that's just something to look for on draft night.
The last thing here with the Raiders, I think that CJ Henderson would also be a great fit here. They have a team need. This is going to be the range he's going with. If I wasn't going to pick Jeudy, I would have gone CJ Henderson. And I think by the time the draft starts, I might even flip-flop that and go CJ Henderson.
I like it.
Okay. And in our mock, I want to point out right now that only one corner is off the board. Okudah out of Ohio State, number 3 to the Lions. Hayden responsible for that one. Okay, the 49ers at 13, they have this pick because of the DeForest Buckner trade with the Indianapolis Colts. San Francisco will pick again later in the first round. But number 13, John, 49ers, who's on your mind?
One cornerback will stay off the board because the Niners are continuing the receiver run with Henry Ruggs. Ruggs' speed obviously pops on film. Broke the Alabama high school state record for a 100-meter dash. The knocks against Ruggs, though, are that one, he never received a large amount of volume among the other 2 stars around him in that offense. However, we know Shanahan's receivers do not receive a large amount of volume anyways. That's not an issue. He's a raw route runner. That's fine. Let's put him with Shanahan, who will run him open with play calling as opposed to letting him or forcing him to work on his own. And this guy is what Shanahan tried to make Marquise Goodwin the past 2 years, a pure over-the-top speedster who can force separation just via the play calling. So to get another explosive touchdown machine on this offense, I think will be a priority for this offense, and they're going to let the receivers fall to him. But whether it's Lamb or Ruggs, I think both fit.
I love it. And I'm sure Kyle Shanahan is watching all these wide receiver prospects. And when Henry Ruggs' speed and explosiveness pops up there, he just salivates. And I mean, you look at, a player in Henry Ruggs who, sure, with his counterpart in Jerry Jeudy, might not be as nuanced and detailed right at this moment. He also offers things that you cannot coach. And it's that straight line speed. It's that big play ability. And who do we trust maybe more than anyone in the league, not named Andy Reid, to get the ball in someone's hands if he wants to? That is Kyle Shanahan. And Henry Ruggs in this offense would just add another weapon to, I think, elevate the play of Jimmy Garoppolo, which that team certainly did last year.
You mentioned Andy Reid, and I think of Andy when I think about Ruggs because of the Tyreek Hill example.
Yes.
And Chris and I talked about this on Button recently. It's a copycat league, as we all know. And I think every offensive coordinator or head coach that calls plays looks at what Andy Reid has done with Tyreek Hill and probably thinks and maybe even fantasizes, what if I had a guy like that? What if we had one of those in our offense? And there are more productive receivers in this draft than Henry Ruggs, but there's not a faster one. And I don't think there's a more coveted piece of the offense than the Tyreek Hill type player right now with today's with what's happening in the NFL. I think someone's going to trade up to get him even higher than 13.
Yeah, and because of that, Paul, it wouldn't be shocking at all if Henry Ruggs is the first wide receiver off the board. And again, we talked about detail and nuance. He might not have it in the other names that we mentioned, but speed is something that teams care about now. And as you mentioned, trading up for that absolutely might happen.
Right. I mean, imagine any head coach going to his GM draft day and be like, would you like to have the fastest player on the field on our offense? Well, then go get him for me. He's out, right?
And by the way, I don't think he even has as successful as a career if he lands with the Raiders. They would ask him to do what Tyrell Williams did all year, and that's essentially one run route down the perimeter. However, with Shanahan, he will make him be successful.
I will say I see a more nuanced route runner underneath than what everyone else is saying. At Alabama, he wasn't just a vertical guy. They used him on shallow crosses, slants, and then he would go vertical as well. If you look at PFF stats, they had how many yards you had by each route, and his was so linear through all the routes. When you're looking at a player like Denzel Mims, who I'm sure we'll get to later, it's all vertical routes. With Henry Ruggs, that was not the case. He's so explosive within like the first 5-10 yards. And I think that is perfect for the Shanahan system. And like you guys said, you're looking for a receiver that can get 6-7 targets. You're not looking for a 9, 10, 11 target player. And I think Henry Ruggs would be a perfect fit.
It'd be wonderful with all those jet sweep type plays that a lot of these offenses are using a handful of times per game as well. All right, go ahead and make it back to back wide receivers that have just come off the board. Josh bringing us to the Buccaneers at 14, the first pick of the Tom Brady era.
Yes, the Tom Brady Buccaneers. And there's a reason why the Patriots staff, one of the best, offensive line coaches in NFL history for so long, and consistently invested draft picks at all 5 blocking positions up front, that building a talented and cohesive offensive line provides a quarterback time to operate inside the structure of an offense. So that's where we're going here at number 14 overall. We're going with Mekhi Becton, the offensive tackle out of Louisville. Now, not necessarily to play left tackle. Jonathan Smith is there, but, Becton, because of Louisville's offense, was able to flip between the left side and the right side, at least in the games that I watched. And, while I think that the Bucs offensive line has some solid pieces, there's no one standout player necessarily. And Becton could potentially evolve into that. And with Tom Brady as your quarterback, you're not planning for 3 or 4 years down the road. You're planning for this 1 to 2 year window. And there's no, again, better way to create a more successful running game and keep Tom Brady inside of where he wants to operate than continuing to build up that offensive line.
Yeah, when you're looking at Mekhi Becton, you said it, you're not going to be beating him around the edge. He's too tall. His arms are too long. So when Brady wants to stay in the pocket, he wants to step up. I mean, you're lining up 2 strengths here. So I would love to pick. I think this is as far as Becton will fall in the draft. I think all 4 of these offensive tackles will be selected within these first 14 picks.
Only allowed 1 sack, 3 quarterback hits just last year, has experience at both tackle spots, as Josh noted, and was the first player in school history to win that Jacobs Trophy for the ACC's top blocker. I mentioned Andrew Thomas, who I believe is the safest pick among the 4 tackles. Having said that, I think Mekhi Becton has the highest ceiling among all 4.
All right, 4 tackles off the board as we hit the 15th pick, which belongs to the Denver Broncos. A couple of moments ago, it was indicated that maybe the Broncos are considering trading up, trying to get up there to grab a wide receiver. That would be nice for Drew Lock. It's hard to believe the Broncos have had 3 consecutive losing seasons. But the 15th pick is yours, Hayden.
Yeah, this is kind of the nightmare scenario for the Broncos with all 3 gone. So I'm sitting here. I'm debating between Justin Jefferson, the LSU receiver, and then C.J. Henderson with a corner spot. And I think I'm going to go with C.J. Henderson here. The need is there, and I think he has the highest upside out of all the corners left. I think you go for that here, knowing that you have a bunch of receivers that you can go with in the 2nd and 3rd pick. I mean, they have 5 top 100 picks. I'm sure you can find 2 guys within the top 100 to fill out the rest of the need, because Drew Lock, he showed some things. He needs more talent around him. They're definitely going to be addressing that. If one of the top 3 receivers was there, I would pick him, but now you got to get settled in with C.J. Henderson.
It is kind of a nightmare scenario, because I think that they would love someone like Henry Ruggs here, because you have Cortland Sutton, who obviously had a breakout 2019. I think Noah Fant, scratch the surface of what he can be in the NFL. It just eliminate a lot of the mistakes that he did make as a rookie, but it takes those tight ends a lot of time. But you mentioned it. Corner is absolutely still in need. Chris Harris no longer on this roster. They did trade for A.J. Bouye, but he's coming to the end of his career. Isaac Yiadom from a few years ago hasn't necessarily exactly panned out as a 3rd-round selection. Again, we mentioned it. Some of these teams are going to have C.J. Henderson as the number 1 corner in this class. Maybe one of them is the Denver Broncos.
The one thing with C.J. Henderson that has me a little worried, last year he almost took the year off. I mean, he was not making tackles. When you look at his 2018 tape, he was a more aggressive player, and he allowed 10.5 yards per target in coverage last year. I see all the traits. I see the long speed. He can be super physical when he wants to. You just got to put it all together, and I think that's why I have a pretty big gap between Okudah and C.J. Henderson, between my corner 1 and corner 2.
It's a great point, Hayden. One, his tackling was absolutely atrocious.
Awful.
But how great his 2018 was, I don't think talent like that just disappears,
Yeah, as a true sophomore too.
Right. And it's a spot where, Henderson was asked to basically cover the alpha receiver on the other team every single week in the SEC. So the production against him is not going to be good. He obviously didn't give full effort at all times. But again, I think there's a reason why so much buzz is building for him right now. And it's obviously a defensive-minded head coach. We forgot to mention that as well.
Given his super athleticism, is he terrific against the catch?
Yeah, he is. I mean, again, this is one of those positions I'm not going to say is as talented as wide receiver and offensive tackle, but corner might be like the 3rd best spot in terms of talent at the top of this draft, with both the guys we mentioned, along with A.J. Terrell and a few other names. So they're all really good. They're all starting cornerbacks in the league. And for how you can never have enough corners, and for how starved some teams are, including the Broncos for that, at this point, C.J. Henderson is a top 15 selection.
Defense could be on the mind of the Falcons as well at 16. John, what do you think?
It certainly is, and K'Lavon Chaisson just falls right into their lap at number 16 overall. The raw tools are shown, and that's exactly why some teams are fretting. It's because they're essentially just raw tools, but that combined with his explosive first step is salivating. Even if you look at the Peach Bowl, remember, he chased down Oklahoma wideout CeeDee Lamb, who we've already mentioned in one particular play. Chaisson was the MVP of that game, actually. You watch that film against Georgia in particular. That's the one that comes to mind because he battled Andrew Thomas on the left side for 40-plus plays in that game, and it sort of defined what he is right now coming into the NFL, because for 30 plays, Thomas just bowled him over. He wasn't getting a single inch on him. But then one single play, Chaisson, he learns it. He learns Thomas's technique. He dips his shoulder, and he pounces up in the backfield and grabs the quarterback for a sack. And I think little moments like that sort of define where Chaisson is. That, yes, he's going to need some development, but he has shown the athleticism and the athleticism to be an elite player, really.
Yeah, and the Falcons have a type. Like how many times have we seen them select athletic, explosive edge rushers? And it's all that they talk about at the position. And once again, Chaisson is that. They tried to add Dante Fowler here in the offseason, and because of failed first-round picks like Vic Beasley and Tack McKinley haven't been up there. But, just because those types haven't worked out doesn't mean, a team moves on from that. So yeah, I absolutely believe Chason could be in the running here. But Daigle and Hayden, you guys know this from working the news. There's a lot of late buzz today that the Falcons are in position and thinking about moving up in the first round. And I wonder who the target is in that scenario.
I would guess it'd be CJ. I would guess it'd be CJ Henderson. I mean, I think they're learning that the Jaguars and some other teams are high on him. I'm not sure if they have the picks and if that would be even a good move for them to be risking it. They're not ready for a Super Bowl with even these next couple of years here. I would want to keep my picks. This is a deep draft and just take your shots here. And going back to Caleb on Chason, he's only 20 years old. And I think that's the difference here. The production wasn't there quite yet. He still needs to learn these counter moves. But when you have that bend and you're starting at LSU as a 20-year-old and making plays, that's where the upside's there.
Go ahead, Daigle.
That was just the wildest news of the week. I mean, the Falcons, even before they released Desmond Trufant, had multiple needs on defense, especially after losing guys like Vic Beasley, But now just the fact that they think they have the draft capital and are in position to add a single player and be impactful next year, it's wild.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the Falcons only have 6 selections in this entire draft, just 3 in the opening 3 rounds. Like they would have to mortgage their future in order to move up, a la the Julio Jones trade. Just to put a capper on Chason, his game is so similar to me to Shaq Barrett, which is easy to say now because Shaq Barrett just led the league in sacks. But it's that initial explosion, that's, wavering want to work through an opponent, but more than anything, work around the offensive tackle. And he has a motor. He will chase down these plays and is a great athlete on those times and those extended plays. And I mean, so many sacks in the NFL, so much production is based on effort among these edge rushers that immediately Chason fills that role for an NFL team.
And also the very unique and coveted ability to bend right away in that rush. And that's the one term that comes up a lot with him. Tremendous bend. It'll serve him very well no matter what team he ends up on. Second half of the first round of the draft set to kick off. The Cowboys at 17. Josh, no Robert Quinn, no Byron Jones on defense, no Randall Cobb, no Travis Frederick on offense.
Well, the board fell perfectly for the Cowboys here because Javon Kinlaw is still on the board. I had to relook at the top 16 picks to make sure he was still on there. Jerry Jones might have to do the same thing because this is a massive need for the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, they late in free agency signed the likes of Dontari Poe and Gerald McCoy to fill the interior of that defensive line. Well, those 2 defensive tackles are part of like the worst run defense in the NFL last year with the Carolina Panthers. I think Kinlaw is the best interior defensive lineman in this class. In fact, I think he's in a tier by himself. The pass rushing juice that he offers, and we don't have an athletic profile, I do want to say that. And I know it's a different position, but it reminded me so much of Jadeveon Clowney back during his days of South Carolina, in that Kinlaw created this immediate instant disruption by beating his man one-on-one, but the quarterback or the running back, whoever had the ball in the backfield, was able just to avoid that, reset, and work in this freedom because Kinlaw played with some bad football players. Like there was no one else to clean up the disruption that he caused. There will be that in the NFL, and I think he's just going to have great success on the inside of any defensive line once he reaches the pros.
So I have seen some debate, however, among Kinlaw's game. What are some of the knocks against him?
I don't know. I think the biggest one is just his lack of production. He just had like a handful of sacks in 2 or 3 seasons. The production is just not there. But I will always go back to it. And this is actually where the phrase was coined. Disruption is production. And he is able to create the disruption that everyone else can finish. It was not finished at South Carolina. He also was not afforded the disruption that other people created and finished that. He was basically a one-man band. He was a one-man show at South Carolina, and that should change again no matter what defensive line he goes to in the NFL.
I will say that he doesn't have a pass rushing plan on all these plays. I think that's with the development. When you're looking at we're at the 17th pick here. You're looking for traits, and Kinlaw has all the traits here. You're not going to get a completely finished product because that would be a top 10 pick. I think Kinlaw fits the mold here. I think he's going to take a little bit of time here, but all the traits are there that I think this would be a worthwhile pick.
We're hitting a little stretch of the draft here now, guys. 18, 19, and 20. All 3 of the picks come via trades. Pretty significant headlines in the last year and a half with defensive trades and teams benefiting from that. Let's kick it off at 18 with the Dolphins. Hayden, that was yours.
Yeah, a bunch of needs here, a lot of good players on the board. I think when you have your quarterback at 5, I think you're going to want to pair him with offensive tackle. And this is where the talent drop-off is from the top 4. I'm going to go with Austin Jackson out of USC. This is not everyone's favorite pick here, but we're talking about a young 20-year-old who last season didn't have an off-season summer. He donated his bone marrow to his sister right before the season. He wasn't playing as strong as he was. I think he has all the traits. I think he is an 89th percentile athlete. The upside's there. I don't think you're going to get a quality rookie starter, but the Dolphins don't need that right now. They need players that can be elite talents in 3 years when they're going to be trying to win playoff games. And I think Austin Jackson is kind of being undersold here if you're just looking at the 2019 tape, but he's more than that. He's the upside pick, not for the 2020 season, but for the 2022 season.
And remember that 2019 tape, we assume is only lacking since he donated bone marrow to his sister only 2 months before his first game, playing as a full season starter in an air raid scheme.
Well, now I hate knocking the guy, but I just didn't really love his evaluation, his game on tape in 2019, and I think that's fair.
It is fair.
Yeah. I will say that the tackle spot, I mean, I probably would have given him because I have their number 26 pick here with the Dolphins, and I would have given Austin Jackson if he was there. I mean, again, this is a Dolphins team that traded away one of the best left tackles in the league in Larry Tunsil and does not have a good offensive line right now. So how, in our case, are you going to take someone with a hip injury in Tua Tagovailoa and not invest in that offensive line? But they also have plenty of other holes. They obviously spent a ton of money on defense in free agency. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if the focus is on offense during this draft for the Dolphins.
It's a pick they got there at 18 from that trade, Minka Fitzpatrick with the Pittsburgh Steelers. At 19, John, the Raiders have this one because of the big, highly debated Khalil Mack trade with the Bears. So what are you thinking there at 19?
Most teams will only look to his poor college championship game as the most recent example. However, the Raiders have a need, and it's at corner, and A.J. Terrell just sort of lands at their feet, despite being either the number 2 or third best corner in this entire draft. A taller guy, but still smooth in transition, can still backpedal and has exquisite technique, can blitz, an extremely strong tackler. However, he does tend to backpedal a tad slower and cede a little bit of ground on those comeback routes that we know are important to stop money downs in the NFL. But still, the fact that they whiffed on Byron Jones and then Eli Apple's contract was voided in free agency, thus leaving them with the same group of nickel corners that they had last year that they were trying to improve on. This is a position of need, and I think they continue addressing here.
And they took his teammate last year in the second round in Trayvon Mullen. So could reunite them a little bit. I agree with you. This would probably be the selection, but can we go some galaxy brain here? Why not in like the best wide receiver class that we remember? Why not double up in the first round? Why not go after you've taken Jerry Jeudy and potentially go get like a Justin Jefferson right here or like a Denzel Mims right here or someone else? Like they are in a position with 2 top 20 picks to really change the landscape of probably the position on their team that is most devoid of talent. And that's at the strength of this class, and that's wide receiver.
Yeah, and that's why I leaned the receiver over C.J. Henderson early. I mean, they're still trying to figure out, is Derek Carr their guy? If Marcus Mariota comes in, can you evaluate him if you don't have the receiving weapons that you need? I also think that they could double up like within the first 3 rounds here.
It'd be awesome.
Yeah, I don't think that you can just say Hunter Renfrow is like your starting slot receiver. Yeah, he's fine, but I mean, he's an average player. Like, I don't see why you would settle for Hunter Renfrow as your starting slot receiver when you can have a true difference maker in Justin Jefferson. It comes back to, do you want to go corner receiver, receiver corner, or double up on either one of those positions? But I think those are easily the top 2 biggest needs on the team.
Remember that crazy video of Antonio Brown when he found out he got released by the Raiders or traded, however it was? Can you imagine what Derek Carr's reaction would be if he got Jerry Jeudy and Justin Jefferson in round 1? That's the video that I would like to see.
That's what I'm saying.
That would be a fun one. Okay, Raiders at 19. They have 2 picks, and they're in the books. Remember, they had 3 first-round picks last year. The Jaguars at number 20. This is their second pick of the first round. Back at number 9, Hayden gave them Derek Brown, defensive tackle from Auburn. Josh, Jacksonville 20.
Oh, this is a tough spot.
I
have so many of these names
He
written
looks
down.
perplexed.
I have all these names written down, and no one is left. I have Derek Brown written down. I have AJ Terrell written down. I had Marlon Davidson, but he most likely would fill that same exact spot that Derek Brown would. Okay, let's go corner then. I'll go with Trayvon Diggs from Alabama because he's coming out of such a high-profile program.
SEC.
But I am so nervous about Trayvon Diggs' transition to the NFL.
That's no reason to make a first-round pick because he played at a good school. Come on,
well,
man.
I mean, there are NFL decision makers who, again, I'm a lunatic and go back and cite and watch these press conferences after the draft. It is shocking how many times you will hear someone say, well, he was coached by this guy in college. He comes from this program, yada, yada. Trayvon Diggs, he's a solid football player. He has great athleticism. I believe he was a former wide receiver, if I'm not mistaken. But his movement to me looks stiff. He inside and outside of his breaks, he has trouble closing. I think there were even at times at Alabama that they shifted their coverage just to give him a little more help. With all that said, though, I believe the NFL is much higher on him than I am. And a team like the Jaguars, who have struggled to make first and second and third round picks in recent years, it wouldn't be a surprise for them to be the one to take this risk.
Hey, Josh, I did a mock draft just the other day, just outlining it. And when I got to this pick, I actually skipped it, filled out the rest of my mock draft, and then went back in and picked Trayvon Diggs. So I'm on the same exact wavelengths with you here. And I see the same things. I think he could be a cover 3 guy. I'm worried about that long speed. I think he's a 4.5s player. Yeah. But the ball skills are there. He's long. He's big. I have him as my 31st player, a early second round grade. But I mean, they're in a tough spot here with how the board fell. I think the corner would be the selection though.
And for whatever it's worth, I do know NFL odds makers have now made it a favorite for Diggs to go outside of the first round, whatever that's worth.
Interesting.
That was the first pick, Diggs out of Alabama to Jacksonville at 20, where I sensed 0% conviction from any of you three.
None. But Paul,
it's
also a team that Jalen Ramsey and AJ Bouye, and just a couple years ago, was like one of the best defenses in the NFL. Right? They tried to recycle that formula. It absolutely did not work. And if you just go down that starting, 11 on that side of the ball from that great season, I mean, it's so different. So, restarting and trying to find that next corner that they believe in here, and teams get stuck in this same exercise as we are. And it would only be Jacksonville for it to happen to them. So
I'll say it one more time. The last 6 first round and second round picks have all been from the SEC, and that's 8 out of the 10 for the Jaguars. It's just an SEC, stay local, stay in Florida, and I think that's why Trayvon Diggs is another reason just to slide him in there.
And I would love to say that an inside linebacker like Kenneth Murray makes sense, but given $54 million to Joe Sherbert this offseason, not to mention Miles Jack still there, they really just don't have a need at that position in the first round.
Jacksonville fans just all went back to sleep, guys. You didn't help them at all.
Went back to London.
Right.
There you go. Eagles at 21. Hayden, I know that they would love to have a wide receiver. There are 3 already off the board. What are you doing with this pick?
This is their dream scenario here, and I think that they could even trade up for him, and it's Justin Jefferson, LSU. Mm-hmm. Get the slot aspect. He was just so dominant there, 111 catches. He was only 20 years old as well. And then the biggest thing that was a surprise is 4.41 speed. You see it a little bit on the tape. I wouldn't have guessed it would have been that high. I think you can slide him on the outside with those 2 receiver sets. I think he immediately becomes the go-to target when you're not looking at Ertz. And just the one thing about the Eagles these last couple of years is they have not had the deep threat. And I think Justin Jefferson can go deep. He had the second most 15-plus yard receptions over the last two seasons, only trailing Jerry Jeudy. He can go deep. He wins in the slot. I see him as in that same tier as the top 3 guys. I don't know what I'm missing.
I was a little shocked that the Eagles did not even try to invest a little bit in wide receiver in free agency prior to the draft. They are leaving this need even for this fantastic draft class. That's living on the edge a little bit. I mean, they put all the eggs in Deshaun Jackson's basket last year. He had that one fantastic game. And then you finish the year with like the likes of Greg Ward being your most consistent wide receiver. That's troubling. But Hayden, I'm with you. Justin Jefferson would be an ideal fit here. And like when you first start watching him, he mostly operated out of the slot, and you think, okay, he's just another, highly productive slot receiver. But then he does so many different things to elevate his game beyond that. Like he wins after catch. He has these unreal contested catch capabilities that, a normal, a pedestrian, an adequate slot receiver would just get like what's created for him, while Justin Jefferson creates it on his own. And that translates to the NFL.
And he can do many things, but Nelson Aguilar, who is now with the Raiders, did run a team-high 66% of his routes from the slot last year. So Jefferson will have a job, assuming he lands here, on day one as well.
Hey, Josh, I'm curious. Do you have Jefferson in that same tier as the top three guys? And Dago, all of us can chime in. Or is he a step below those guys? To me, he's right in that tier. I have him as my 14th overall player. I'm really bullish.
I have a name that we haven't even mentioned yet as my number 3 wide receiver.
I got a feeling I know who it is.
Yeah, so I will not reveal that just yet. But I think Justin Jefferson is in like that 4 to 5 category along with Henry Ruggs. Even though they're like very different types of players on their own and how they win, they're both supremely talented.
Bringing us to the Minnesota Vikings at number 22. And John, you get to actually be Rick Spielman for the next 10 to 15 minutes because they have 2 picks at 22 and 25. In the first round, and you get to make both of them. Let's start at 22.
One, apologies to Vikings fans. Did not mean to work out like this. But 2, they see the receivers that are coming off the board, and they attempt to address Trayvon Diggs' departure, and they go Denzel Mims. Mims played outside wideout in Glenn Thomas's spread attack at Baylor, but there's no denying he can play in the slot as a dominant receiver as well. Straight line acceleration to win vertically, as shown in catching a crazy 29% of his career receiving yards on the go route in college. He was also the only college football player to score at least 8 receiving touchdowns in each of the past 3 years. Not only is the production there, but the athletic tools and traits are there. And I know Josh Norris is a big fan.
Oh, yes. I love Denzel Mims' evaluation. And it's one that when you dig in a little deeper, you start to see like details and nuance that you didn't see at first. Like he's so good at using like his hands or his elbows or his shoulders to like create that sliver of separation in his breaks at the catch point. And I mean, his acrobatic style is fantastic. You add that into like a 6'3", 200+ frame that, allows him to naturally win in the air. But on top of it, like this guy was not given easy production at Baylor. He had just 1 screen reception this past season. How often do you turn on games on Saturday and you see these guys force-fed the ball near the line of scrimmage to get easy yards? He was not given that. I think that, taking on the Stefon Diggs label is a difficult task for any rookie. And I think Denzel Mims is a different style of player, but I think he can absolutely thrive early on in his NFL career.
Yeah, I had a project where I looked at all the deep targets from last year, and Stefon Diggs was by far the most efficient deep target receiver. And I think that's exactly what you're getting with Denzel Mims. I'm a little less convinced that he can win underneath, and he's not more of just a straight line athlete. I have him closer to DK Metcalf than Chris Godwin. I've seen comparisons a little bit to both. And that's not a knock on Mims. He can be an elite wide receiver 2 for an offense early, and maybe he can develop those other things. I wouldn't be convinced that he can be a wide receiver 1 immediately, but with the Vikings, you don't need that. Adam Thielen's your guy there. And I think Denzel Mims with 6-7 targets going deep per game is the perfect fit.
And Paul, before we move on quickly, I would not be surprised if this is an offensive line selection. I know that obviously wide receiver is, the most prominent need because of the deal that they made. But from those that cover the Vikings and just some buzz around it right now, like this Riley Reif, situation is a little uncertain at left tackle. Maybe move Brian O'Neill to that left tackle spot and draft a right tackle, or even just draft a left tackle out there. We talked about it in the recent podcast, but I would love to see this team make a move for Trent Williams, and it might take one of these first-round picks to do it.
If they are wanting to use that 22nd pick on an offensive tackle, it may play out this way. And our mock draft right here, 5 are already off the board. So would they think that the 6th best offensive tackle, if they go via the draft, is worth that 22nd pick? Rick Spielman might be facing that call here coming up next week.
And remember, Rick Spielman's right here. And we see the board, and we see there are still offensive linemen left, so we're waiting until 25.
Love it. Love it.
The last time Bill Belichick had to make a draft selection without Tom Brady on the roster was all the way back in 2000. Josh, the honor is yours, the Patriots at 23.
Oh, yes. Wouldn't it be just great headlines and SEO for, this mock draft to include a quarterback to the New England Patriots? I just can't do it, though. I will say, that is the storyline that most fascinates me heading into the 2020 season. So many words were written about what's Tom Brady going to do. Well, what's Bill Belichick going to do now? Is he going to be patient? Is he going to, have this position that is the most pivotal one in football and address it as soon as he can, that, other teams and different decision makers have had to do countless times during his time with Tom Brady? I'm going to bypass that and say that Bill is a little patient. I'm going to go with, a player who doesn't, draw a lot of accolades, and Marlon Davidson here out of Auburn, who's kind of like this outside to inside player. Obviously, Derek Brown drew all the reviews with that Auburn defensive line. But, there's a lot of buzz for Marlon Davidson having possibly the best interviews during NFL Combine Week. He has plus athleticism for the position. That hybrid player in the mold of Trey Flowers, who they haven't really replaced since he departed for so much money. The Detroit Lions, who, again, the Patriots are sort of multiple and versatile on defense to win outside the tackle, then move inside on those passing situations. I think Marlon Davidson is a pretty easy fit here in case for the New England Patriots at pick number 23.
I don't have Marlon Davidson ranked this high, but I agree that the fit is there. And I had him mocked to the Titans later, just the same scheme inside out. He's another player that could have been a little bit more productive. But I mean, the traits are there. I think you can either put him one of two ways. He can either add a little bit of weight and kick inside. He can lose a little bit of weight and then go win on the edge. I think he can end up being that sneaky first round pick here that's not getting that much buzz.
I agree.
I think we could also look for the Patriots to kind of go off the board and either go a guy like Xavier McKinney or Kenneth Murray or even Grant Delpit at this spot as well. It's going to be interesting once it falls here.
And with no second-round pick, we could easily see the Patriots trade down. I mean, they have 3 third-rounders at this moment, but, a drop to maybe later on the first round or even all the way back to the second round to pick up an extra selection in round 2 or round 3, because this is kind of a rebuilding group with the Patriots. It's not like they just lost Tom Brady and they're returning everyone else. They lost a ton of good players on that defensive side of the ball too. So I'm sure Bill will want to start fresh at a lot of positions.
Guys, think about what Josh just said. A rebuilding group with the Patriots.
It's wild.
Right.
I can't wait to see it. Isn't that fascinating? So many teams in these last 2 decades have had to start from scratch with coaches and quarterbacks across the league 2 or 3 or 4 times, maybe 7 if you're the Browns. Bill has been able just to ride. I mean, he obviously changes things up year to year and changes his mentality and his scheme and so on and so forth. But at the core, it's been the same. It is no longer the same. And I am so intrigued to see how he handles that massive dynamic and that hurdle, if he's patient, if he's aggressive, whatever it is. And we have no idea.
I'm with you on the excitement level with New England right now. And maybe this is the byproduct of growing up in Iowa. We didn't have a professional team. I don't love or hate any team based off of the last 48 years of my life. I just like to see exciting things in the NFL. And thinking about Bill Belichick trying to maintain that level of excellence where they always win at least 10 games without Tom Brady is going to be great theater. I mean, Tom Brady trying to win without Bill Belichick is wonderful theater. And as it relates to this draft, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they didn't take a quarterback. I mean, why wouldn't Bill Belichick think, hey, I can win with Jarrett Stidham. Helped turn Tom Brady into what he is. I won with Matt Castle. I won with Jimmy Garoppolo. I won with Jacoby Brissett. Why can't I win with Jarrett Stidham?
I love it. I think he slow plays it. I absolutely think he slow plays it. So,
yeah, it'll be a fun one to watch. Patriots at 23. The Saints at 24. Hayden, this one is yours. Not a lot of movement down there in the offseason. Drew Brees there at least 1 more year, maybe 2 more years. Teddy Bridgewater is out. I love the Emmanuel Sanders signing at wide receiver. What do you think at 24?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go big picture to start and talking about just team needs and then time horizons. And I think when you aren't ready to win a Super Bowl, you can draft the best player available. But when you're one piece away, two pieces away, I think you just got to fill the need. And with the Saints, they don't have a whole lot of needs here. And I've seen a lot of people mock Jordan Love, get him in there, groom him. But I don't see why you would do that if you're the Saints. Get the best player, try to win a Super Bowl with Drew Brees these last couple seasons, or this is his last season. I will say, a colleague of ours, Drew Brees. Reportedly, we'll see about that. But my pick's going to end up being Patrick Queen, the linebacker from LSU. I think you can upgrade Kiko Alonso. I think he has the best coverage skills out of these linebackers outside of Isaiah Simmons. I think he averaged like five yards per target in coverage last year. Super young. He's from the area. I think that would be the best fit.
Let's talk watching him play. Like the pick. I mean, sideline to sideline, he was wonderful. I'd like to come back to Josh and John on something you brought up there, Hayden, about the possibility of the Saints going quarterback at 24. Yes. I don't like it at all. If you're a 12, 13, 14 win team and you still have that quarterback back, do everything you can to win that Super Bowl in the next year or two. So I would not like a quarterback at 24. Josh, John, how do you guys feel?
Well, I agree with that. And the fact that I think windows to win are real. And I just wrote up, the team needs in the mock draft for the New Orleans Saints, and they basically don't have any. This might be the most complete roster in the NFL. With that said, we know that Sean Payton was basically going to take Patrick Mahomes if he was available in that Marshawn Lattimore pick. That wasn't so long ago. Like, Sean Payton is like any one of us in some ways, right? Like, if he falls in love with a quarterback, it's not like Sean Payton's only going to be there for the next year or two. Sean Payton's there for the long term. And I'm not saying that Jordan Love is Patrick Mahomes at all. But if the NFL wants to scratch that itch a little bit of that off-script, big play style that I'm going to have a playmaker mentality and create something out of nothing, maybe Jordan Love has that the most in this class. There's a lot of issues to work on. But I don't think it would be a shock at all for this team to think about that future here at number, 24?
Would you applaud that pick more, or would you question it more?
It's tough to question Sean Payton in general, Paul.
But would you like it? Do you think that would be a good move?
Look, I think this idea that Taysom Hill is the future of this team, I think that's a bit of a stretch too. Because one, he's on a 1-year contract, and two, he's 30 years old. It's not like he's this 25-year-old young stud that they can work on for the future. And I know Sean Payton's been the driver of that for years and years and years. But again, I go back to that he loved Patrick Mahomes, was most likely going to take him. And if you're sitting here at number 24 and a quarterback that you love falls to you, and I don't know if he does, but yeah, it's a tough one. And I think, Paul, it's a great debate that I think Super Bowl winning one is different than building for 5 years, but I also can't, get mad at a head coach for wanting to build for the next 5 to 10 years as well.
And it would be obscene, given that they did use the first-round tender on Taysom Hill, to then use a first-round pick on Jordan Love and now have two quarterbacks in a roundabout way who you have first-round value on not see the field whatsoever the following year.
Well, Mickey Loomis, you're morphing back into Rick Spielman right now because the 25th pick, the Vikings are back. Your second pick here for the Vikes in the first round back at 22. You gave him Denzel Mims, wide receiver from Baylor. How about 25?
We said we could wait on offensive line, and the one fell to us. We're heading with Josh Jackson to the podium. A 4-year starter for the Cougars. Josh Jones. 4-year starter for the Cougars. He's a raw prospect, but remember, he played in 3 different offensive systems at Houston, under 5 separate offensive line coaches at the collegiate level. And as Josh mentioned earlier, that issue that we have with Riley Reif, we clearly need to do something at left tackle. I say we because now I'm Rick Spielman in the Vikings contingent. So yes, we're addressing that tackle spot and moving with a guy who we know we can develop now that we have restructured Kirk Cousins' deal and also have Dalvin Cook's extension looming in the background.
And what's imperative for all these offensive line evaluations for the Vikings is if they can move. And really what Josh Jones did at Houston was they asked him to get out in space, to be a lead blocker, to be a puller in a lot of situations. And he did that at a very high level. So not only can he hold up on an island in pass protection, in the Kubiak style of running game, he's going to be able to reach and get to the second level or reach, gaps closer to the center than a lot of these other tackles who aren't going to be able to do that.
My only question here is, with the Vikings, what are you going to do at corner? Not using one of these picks at corner is, I think, going to be a big struggle. I mean, you lost 3 of them, like your top 3 guys, and you don't know what you're going to do at the safety spot if Harris gets moved. And I know they wanted to reset here, but not going with a corner in one of these picks would be a little bit of a surprise. But I like both of the players.
Well, let's talk about that really quick, because the Vikings essentially will have to make 2 of those 3 selections at 22 and 25. Do we think they pass on wide receiver altogether and go offensive line and cornerback? Because all 3 are arguably pressing needs to put at the top of the list.
Yeah, and I would say equal needs. Yeah, and Mike Zimmer is the type who I think, he probably trusts his corner evaluations more than any other position. You just look at his history. I mean, Mike Hughes was the first-round pick a couple of years ago. Dre Kirkpatrick, Mackenzie Alexander, who's departed now, was an early round selection. Mike Zimmer loves to take cornerbacks, even dating back to his days with the Bengals. So if I had to pick 2 of those 3 positions that are filled in this first round, I would say corner above wide receiver. I really would.
Okay.
The one guy that I like is Jalen Johnson out of Utah corner. I gave him a first round grade. The guy is just so physical at the line of scrimmage. I don't think he has the deep speed that you're seeing, but within 10 yards, if you want to get physical, if you want to create pressure with your front 7 and just have someone jam someone at the line of scrimmage, Jalen Johnson's your guy.
And let's also consider one more scenario before we move on to the 26th pick with the Vikings with 22 and 25. You didn't give them a wide receiver. They're a team that's very well positioned with those 2 picks to move up into the early teens if they really liked one of those wide receivers. And it might play out this way. We didn't have a wide receiver going until 11, and they went 11, 12, 13. But if next Thursday night those first 10 picks go with the wide receiver, they're all still on the board, and there's a lot of very good ones, as we've talked about. Rick Spielman's in a pretty good spot if he loved one to dangle that 22 and 25 and get up somewhere and grab one of them. All right, Dolphins at 26. They've been busy. They've already made 2 picks. At 5, Tua Tagovailoa. Josh, you made that pick. At 18 for the Dolphins, Austin Jackson. Hayden, you gave him that offensive tackle out of USC. And Josh, it's yours at 26.
Yeah, the Dolphins have certainly planted a lot of Patriots onto their team already, right? Kyle Van Noy, they gave a big contract to. Landon Roberts is another name. They've added some, good pass rushers in a rotation piece like Shaq Lawson, Emmanuel Ogbah, or others. They do have that, one spot that is not quite filled on a quote-unquote Patriots defense. And it's like that hybrid safety / linebacker. And so Xavier McKinney out of Alabama, I think, is an ideal fit here. I mean, just looking at the percentage of places he played last year, 26% of snaps at free safety, 36% as a box safety, 33% as a slot corner, even 3% as an edge rusher. Xavier McKinney, while not the best athlete, obviously Nick Saban trusted him to be that movable mismatched chess piece to line up against maybe, where the other offense is going to try to take advantage of the defense, and was asked to lock it down. And that is a pivotal piece where you have 2 corners in Byron Jones and Xavier Howard. Why not add one more great playmaker in Xavier McKinney here?
Shades of Minkah Fitzpatrick, and that he can just play all over and that he makes plays. Remember, he was a semifinalist for the Jim Thorpe Award for the nation's top defensive back. The Dolphins are the one organization that could and would utilize him across the field.
Yeah, I think he's a day 2 player if you want to put him just single high up in space. But if you want to get him in the box, get him dirty, I think he's a day 1 player. Nick Saban gave him so many responsibilities, like we were talking with Trayvon Diggs, where they're not only putting one player on the island, they made Xavier McKinney that guy where he had to create a lot, 95 tackles. Just the 8th percentile adjusted spark athleticism is the only thing, in my opinion, keeping him out of like the top 15, top 20.
And Paul, I know you just did a podcast with Sims about these safeties. There are a lot of these types in this class. I mean, you look at Antoine Winfield, played about the same amount on free safety box and in the slot. I would throw out Ashton Davis from Cal, did a lot of that as well. Geno Stone, great Delpit. Just as the NFL is turning into this big nickel package rather than the smaller, shiftier slot corners, college teams are absolutely doing it as well. And these are really versatile, valuable pieces to defenses to make them multiple.
And Chris actually had Winfield out of Minnesota as his number one safety.
I love it.
And at number two, he had McKinney from Alabama. With as much as teams value a safety right now, you mentioned the big nickel when they bring in the third safety, which is, a fairly new concept. And the really good ones can play in the run game. They can maybe guard somebody out of the slot or a running back or a tight end, in addition to playing center field. Can you really see a scenario where the best safety in this class is still around at 26?
It's a good question. I don't know if I have an answer to it.
Well, I have one. I don't think that these teams picking the 20s have a glaring need at safety. And with the receivers and the offensive tackles that we're talking about, I think that's the only reason is just a team needs perspective. He's just kind of going to drop a little bit. That'd be my guess.
I'm just deferring to Hayden from now on with everything, by the way.
There you go. You can just follow up. If it works out that way, it would certainly count as tremendous value for the Dolphins or whoever would get the top safety in this class, somewhere in the 20s, maybe even the lower 20s. Seattle at 27, Hayden. John Schneider, the GM, is just as likely to trade down or out of this pick. But if he stays there at 27, what do you think?
Well, Josh, I'll refer this one to you. And this is a guy that we both love, edge rusher, Penn State, Yetur Gross-Matos. And this is if Clowney doesn't work out, if they lose Clowney, which it sounds like is definitely a possibility, I think Yetur Gross-Matos would be a productive player for them, super long. He had 14 and a half TFLs, 9 sacks. The first step explosion, I think, is underrated. I think people don't understand how quick he gets out of his stance. The arms are long. I think he needs a little bit of work with the pass rushing moves, but the all-around player, the upside, I think fits.
Let's take a walk down narrative street here because, again, citing their post-draft press conferences, it has become apparent that John Schneider and Pete Carroll care that prospects that they draft have overcome adversity. Like they want them to go through something in their life and come out better in the end. And maybe there might not be a more, significant, wild story than what Yetur Gross-Matos has gone through during his childhood. I mean, losing his father in, I think, a boating accident, losing his brother due to a lightning strike. Obviously on the field, Gross-Matos, might not be the most consistent player, but those highlights, those highs are significant. And, if you can get a pass rusher that completely takes an offense off their game plan 3 to 5 times per game and completely blows up the play, that is valuable. And absolutely Gross-Matos offers that.
Ravens at 28, awfully good last year, 14-2, had the MVP at quarterback. Play Eric DeCosta here for a moment here, John, moving from Rick Spielman. What do you think at 28?
Much like the Seahawks, I think the Ravens will be waiting for an edge rusher, and A.J. Epinesa just sort of falls to them in this spot. Long arms, heavy hands, and a former 3-sport athlete, so we know he's versatile. He doesn't have the most explosive first step, and you can tell on tape, but he does have the tendency to mow over people and push them into the backfield, which is an extremely strong asset. It's going to be interesting because they do have Matt Judon, who hasn't signed his franchise tag just yet, which makes him a sign and trade candidate on Thursday evening at the first night of the draft. But I think this sort of just falls to them and their continued chase to add more edge rushers in particular to their front seven.
Yeah, with AJ Epinesa, it's just how high are you going to take a player that's not going to be winning with speed off the edge. And I know some people like that. Give me the Chasons of the world. Give me like a Josh Uche out of Michigan, just somebody that's going to win with speed. I don't really love these type of players, but if there is a team, the Ravens do like these guys.
It's tough. I mean, we talked with Derek Brown about not having pass rush juice. I'm very scared that AJ Epinesa does not have pass rush juice. He's kind of in this middle area, right? Like 280 pounds. Is he going to gain more weight and work inside? And that's where he's going to get his best disruption, like a Marlon Davidson, who we talked about. Or is he going to try to stay on the outside? At the very least, Paul, he understands who he is as a pass rusher. Like he understands that he has to use that length. He has to go through you rather than around you. So at least he understands his identity. But at the NFL level, I'm concerned that at best that's your secondary or tertiary pass rusher and not your primary pass rusher. And in the first round at pick number 28, I always want to draft, your primary pass rusher on an NFL team.
Yeah, and the fact that he ran over a 5, just barely over 5 at the combine, and now teams can't get back in there and see if maybe he just had a bad day and get him at a 4.85 or something like that. That's not going to happen with the current state of travel being it's just not something you can get done. So it's a real interesting scenario there for AJ Epinesa and where he ends up. 29, Titans. Josh, it's yours.
Yes. So the band is back together here with the Tennessee Titans. I mean, they basically are just trying to recycle the formula that worked in 2019. Bring back Ryan Tannehill, bring back Derrick Henry. I question that a little bit because that style of play of, great blocking to create lanes for Derrick Henry and then great blocking to give Ryan Tannehill time and off play action passes, that's tough to do year over year. But in order to do that, they're going to have to replace Jack Conklin at right tackle. And the man to do that is Ezra Cleveland coming out of Boise State. This time last year, not many people were pegging a guy named Chris Lindstrom to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft. He was a top, I believe, 20 selection by the Atlanta Falcons and immediately started in the NFL. Ezra Cleveland is a player coming, again, from the Broncos of Boise State, who mostly spent his time at left tackle. We talked about how important athleticism is to Tristan Wirfs' evaluation. Ezra Cleveland is basically in the same level of athlete. Now, here, I would ask him to move to the right side, and that can be different. It's like writing with your right hand instead of your left hand instead of your right hand, like everything is flipped. But I think it's imperative for this team to maintain starting caliber offensive linemen at 5 positions from week 1 until week 17 or week 18 or however long the NFL season now is. And because the blocking is so important to this team's identity.
Yeah, with Ezra Cleveland, all the tools are there with athleticism. He was really productive at Boise State as well. The strength, he needs to get stronger. But I do think that is out of all of the traits, if you're lacking one, pure strength is probably the one that you can actually improve upon, especially when you get into an NFL weight room. So I think he's a high upside pick for him.
And the fact is, right now, Dennis Kelly is projected to start in place of Jack Conklin, who went on to Cleveland. And Dennis Kelly, while a good player, is a career swing tackle. He's played backup for his entire career. So just to bring in at least a strong, high-ceiling prospect is the correct move, the way the Titans and Mike Vrabel run this offense.
It's amazing when the Packers have run offensively, just the numbers to support how heavy they've gone on that side of the ball with their early picks. For example, last year they had 2, both of them spent on defense. This year they come up at 30, Hayden. Offense or defense?
Well, I keep seeing one player fall, and that's Kenneth Murray, but I'm not going to go there. It's Brandon Ayuk at receiver. That's the guy I want. The Packers need explosion, and he has it. I mean, he has a 4.5 athlete, but he looked faster on tape. He yards after the catch machine, and I think the Packers just desperately need somebody to line up opposite of Devontae Adams. I think this is another thing where it's based off of your window to win. You need to pick a player now instead of picking Jordan Love.
I mean, it's shocking that the Packers did not try to, elevate the talent at wide receiver again this offseason. Like last year, we thought that they were going to do that and help Aaron Rodgers. They didn't. So far, they haven't done it. This almost has to be a wide receiver. And Brian Gutekunst's, recent history and the Packers' recent history, they have doubled up at positions of need. You look at a couple of years ago, Jair Alexander and Josh Jackson in round 1 and round 2. Last all season, you can throw out Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, and Rashawn Gary, all to help as edge rushers. This team is not afraid to double down on positions of need early in the draft. So while I think most likely the pick at number 30 is a wide receiver, it wouldn't be shocking at all if the second round pick is also at wide receiver.
And while I do agree it should be a wide receiver, if I can play devil's advocate, Aaron Rodgers' potential successor is waiting right there at number 30. Jordan Love has fallen this entire way. So while I don't think it's the option, I do think we can't completely take it off the table in this situation.
Oh my gosh. I mean, we talked about with Sean Payton. I mean, just imagine the look that Aaron Rodgers would give off into the universe if his replacement is already drafted now, rather than wide receivers, allowing them to be a better football team in 2020. That would be incredible. I would tune in for it.
Yeah, I've got to raise both hands here and say, no way. No way.
Devil's advocate.
Think about, hey, that's what makes these things fun. But especially with the kind of strides that they took last year on offense and really got that moving in the right direction. Aaron being the age he is and knowing that improvement they made, if you're going to draft his replacement right now, all the thoughts are going to come back to his head, not only for this season, however this season plays out, but in his time, they've never drafted a single wide receiver, tight end, or running back in the first round.
Wow.
Not once. That's time.
That's not good, Paul.
Ludicrous.
It's
a waste.
It's crazy. And so now he's got things figured out. He's got a coach he gets along with once again. I would just be shocked if they went quarterback there. Although that would be a fun look to see on Aaron's face if it did play out that way.
I also would throw in possibly offensive tackle if it's not quarterback.
There you go. Yeah.
Because Ricky Wagner is kind of a journeyman right tackle. He's been brought in to replace Brian Bulaga. Mm-hmm. So if someone, again, like Ezra Cleveland falls to here who fits their athletic models that they care about along the offensive line, he's possibly a pick. But it would be shocking if they don't make this draft about adding weapons around Aaron Rodgers. You have to do it, or else you're capping your offense around still one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL.
Yeah, it would not only be shocking, I think it would be a very big mistake. Okay, 31, the 49ers. John, you've been Rick Spielman twice. Now you get to be John Lynch twice. Lucky, at 13. It's been a little while, but all the way back at 13, you gave him Henry Ruggs. Love that pick, the wide receiver, Alabama. What's on your mind at 31?
I initially had them going either Jalen Johnson or Christian Fulton. But if Kenneth Murray is going to continue falling here, we don't have a choice but to grab an inside linebacker. We know the way the Niners and John Lynch, structure contracts is to front load them, 2-year deals with heavy guarantees at the front, thus making them expendable in the back end. And so if we have that with guys like Fred Warner and Quan Alexander, not to mean they won't be on the team in a couple years, but we can now give ourselves an advantage in the cap space by adding Kenneth Murray, who's a 3-down linebacker. When I watch him, it's funny because he plays like he's on fire, like literally on fire, except he sometimes, which is what led to him missing 20 tackles in 2018, although he became a much better tackler just last year, improved on that fact. The fact is he lacks direction sometimes because he plays with such ferocity and speed and excitement to really play the game. But he's a 3-down linebacker. And although he'll have to prove it at the next level, I do think he can also run with running backs and play man-to-man coverage in times against tight ends. So this is probably just a best player on the board pick for this situation.
Yeah, I'm not in love with it, Daigle. One, because I think Fred Warner might be the best linebacker in the NFL when he's on. Like he's just fantastic. Also, this team is not replacing DeForest Buckner. I'm not saying like you can or they necessarily have to because how much rotation that they have. And we talked about the cliff that there still is at interior defensive line. One, I would expect the 49ers to trade out of this pick. But two, if not, like I would throw out, hey, now I don't know what you think about these guys, but like Justin Matabuki or Neville Gallimore, Ross Blacklock, so on and so forth, like some of these names who might emerge as end of first round, fringe second round types along the interior defensive line.
Yeah, with the 49ers, I would be shocked if they're making this pick unless they traded down from pick 13. This is their last pick within the top 100. Yep. And I think Daigle is right. We need to have Kenneth Murray in this first round mock draft. And I do think a team could be trading up for that spot. The other curveball here is, would they pick Jordan Love here? I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo's contract they can get out of. Why not take a swing with Jordan Love if you're in this spot? And if Jordan Love's on the board here, I think one of these teams has got to be trying to trade up into the first round to snag him with this specific spot. You want that 5th-year team option with Jordan Love because I don't think you're getting a great player in year 1, year 2, even possibly year 3. You're going to want that 5th-year option.
Paul, we love chaos here at Rotoworld.
Yes.
If you cannot tell. Look, my feelings for Jimmy Garoppolo is that he's in a perfect situation to succeed right now. But it's not like I am in love with Jordan Love's evaluation either. He does need grooming. He does need a bit of time. He does need to make mistakes and figure those out. But at the end of the day, I think so often those mistakes are made when you're actually starting and you're on an NFL field. And I'm not sure he's going to be able to have that ability if he gets taken here. I don't know. It just seems like the 49ers just love Jimmy much more than someone here sitting in 900 square feet on the train tracks with the kitchen behind me loves someone like Jimmy Garoppolo.
And if we're assuming their need is that front seven nose tackle, we know they're not going to address it like in this round. Like you said, Josh, those names you mentioned can be had in the second round on day 2, even the third round maybe. So, yeah, I guess the odds are they trade out of this pick if this is what's left. But I just can't imagine a Thursday going off without seeing Kenneth Murray land anywhere in it.
Bringing us to the champions, Josh, Chiefs, 32, final pick.
The Chiefs have 20 of 22 starters returning for the 2020 season. That is incredible when you think that this is the Super Bowl winning franchise, and usually those teams are picked apart in free agency. Part of me wants to give this team KJ Hamler, the wide receiver out of Penn State, because maybe he's one of the fastest receivers in this class. And that would just be fun. That would be electric. You know, just another 4-3 wide receiver with 3.5 seconds to throw the football. Good luck stopping that. But just looking at this roster, like cornerbacks, I don't know if like 80% of NFL fans could name the starting cornerbacks for the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, you have the likes of Bashad Breeland and Travarius Ward, Rashad Fenton, Alex Brown. I could say the same thing, though, about their linebackers. Maybe that speaks to just how they value those positions. But in a passing league, we will go with a corner, and we'll go with Jalen Johnson out of Utah. I know we've talked about him earlier on the show. He has not been selected here. The number one thing that stands out to me about him is ball skills. And whenever I see a corner be able to play the football in the air along with his man, to me it shows that the game slows down for him, right? Because when the ball's in the air for a lot of these other corners, they panic. You know, they want to disrupt the catch point. They try to tackle wide receivers too early. You know, he's cool. He's calm. He's collected. He allows the game to come to him and to locate and then make a play on the football. And that's a trait that I think absolutely translates early on in the NFL.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs are who Twitter wants everyone to be. The passing matters the most on offense and on defense. I think Jalen Johnson would be a perfect fit here. I love him. He's a top 25 player on my board. It just comes down to Jordan Love's just not going to make it in our first round mock draft, which that's something I love to see. And I think that's even certainly possible. I think like we just mentioned, all these teams picking at the end, they're mostly set at quarterback. And if we don't think he's a top 20 player and one of these teams are going to be drafting a quarterback in the top 20 picks, he can fall.
So Hayden, let me ask you this. Let's spin it forward then, because if Jordan Love is still on the board in one of these late first round picks, a team most likely will trade up for him. But in our mock, we already have the likes of the Chargers who pick at 37, the Dolphins at 39, already having a quarterback to their name. So who might trade up for Jordan Love with their second round selection? Could it be the Colts planning for the future? Could it be I don't know, the Jaguars who, you know, are saying that their starter is Gardner Minshew, but who knows if that's the truth? Who could you see trading up for Jordan Love?
Yeah, I'm not sure. And especially when you have Cam Newton on the streets, when you have Jameis Winston on the streets, Andy Dalton, all these other guys that can be competing for backup jobs and potential starting jobs later on. There just might be a musical chairs scenario where everyone has a quarterback and there's some good options on the street with Cam Newton that maybe he just falls and we could see like a Drew Lock slide. I'm not convinced that he goes round one.
And it's not just, although they don't have the profile of Jordan Love, it's not just Jordan Love we have missing this first round mock. You still have guys like Christian Fulton, Grant Delpit, Jalen Reagor, a lot of players that most are mocking to the first round and that we just could not find fits for.
Paul, to put a cap on that conversation, the Indianapolis Colts have 2 early second-round picks, pick number 34 and pick number 44. We know that right now they're kind of invested in Phillip Rivers. What about beyond that? I wouldn't be surprised if they are the team that if we see Jordan Love in the 20s, that they, just deal a third-round selection to move up 10 spots or so and get Jordan Love on their roster.
That's the draft, 1 through 32. Now for the most important part of this draft, the side notes, the questions I've had in my mind here for the last couple hours. Keep Josh up there. Josh, is that a cutting board behind you? Or is that just like part of a decorative sink?
No, it's a cutting board. Also, you can probably see a mortar and pestle there. A mortar and pestle is probably one of the more underrated kitchen utensils out there. You know, if you need to make pastes, if you need to make sauces, if you need to grind herbs or spices.
When was the last time you used it? When was the last time you used it? What'd you make?
Last year.
A little chimichurri. So, you know, you get some cilantro, you get some parsley, you get some garlic.
Would you put it on?
Olive oil. You know, just like the normal chicken. Just
salad.
chicken. Chicken is so bland.
Chicken.
After 4 weeks here being quarantined, chicken is just chicken. So you need to spice it up a little bit with some chimichurri. That's the takeaway from this exercise.
Okay. Hayden, bring Hayden back up here.
What's up?
Hayden, HGTV called and said that they cannot feature you in a show unless you have something behind you. So what's your hometown?
Yeah, I'm from Southern California. I'm in Irvine currently. This is my mom's basement. She won't let me put up anything in my mom's basement. But I'm just happy to be on this mock draft. I figured I was going to be stuck in my mom's basement for like 3, 4, 5 more years. So maybe I can get a picture frame. Maybe NBC can write me a little extra check and get something nice, decorative behind me.
Paul, just a comment here. Hayden recently engaged. So maybe he soon has some help to help with that design and culture behind him as well.
Yeah. Okay. And John, you're not free of this either. For the next draft, can we get you maybe Ryan Tannehill or Bucky Richardson, a Texas A&M quarterback behind you that's not Johnny Manziel?
Oh, that's good. I should get a dat win. Something in the mail soon to hang up behind me. That's a good idea, actually.
What do you think? Yes?
Yes, of course. The background, actually, I have something in the works. It'll be coming in. Unfortunately, it's not all Ryan Tannehill and everyone else, but there is something coming in the works. So.
Yeah, I've heard that for 6 months. Paul, you're not off the hook though.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So that's a fireplace behind you. I'm sure as Mr. Handyman, you certainly laid and set every single one of those, I'm sure, real stones and really put that muscle to work building the foundation from the ground up.
This is actually this is the basement. So like Hayden, I'm also in a basement. This is a fireplace that's never been used. This is ever. This is a portion of the house I'd never sat in until the last month. This right here was empty until I had to do the first unbuttoned mock with Chris and like dress it up with some things.
Yeah.
So that's.
Paul, your fireplace is bigger than my entire apartment that I can afford here in Fairfield County. So I am very envious of that. Just got to say.
That's a good point. And I actually feel bad that I haven't sat down here because it's nice.
I'm sure it is, Paul. If you have like a rollout couch or something, just, invite me over. I'll just mind my business down there.
We can just do it from somebody's basement. We can all 4 be in the same basement next year instead of 2 of us.
That's right.
All right.
Guys. You have to get Hayden a long sleeve Navy shirt by then, but we'll work on it.
When's the wedding, Hayden, by the way? When is the wedding?
We're looking at May of next year, so I'm hoping everything blows over. Unfortunately, I had a couple of friends. Their wedding's kind of getting moved around too, but I think we're safe right now, but it's going to be a beautiful time.
That's what happened with Josh's and I wedding. It got moved to next year, so
right.
So Hayden, I just want you to think about this scenario: middle of next April, when you really want to study the 3rd and 4th tight end, and you're less than a month out from your wedding, and there are details to be taken care of.
Right.
How are you going to get out of that?
I'm going to peel back the curtain. I do heavy analytics. I'm just going to do the analytics big board. Throw it up there. If you want the analytics version of this, I'm not going to watch any tape. That's on to somebody else. John Daigle, Josh Norris. That's going to be your guys' job. I'm going to be crunching the numbers, submitting, and then I'm on to wedding season. I'm sorry.
I'm just helping you now. You need to start thinking about this. You need to start thinking about how you're going to carve out those 4 hours when there are menu items to be picked out and things like that for your wedding. So just something to think about for the next 12 months. It's going to be tough. Yes, it will. Hey, guys, that was fun. Appreciate you making all the picks 1 through 32. Huge thanks to Josh, also to Hayden, and to John. I'm Paul. This was the 2020 Rotoworld NFL mock draft. You can watch all these guys, get all their thoughts on the picks leading up to the draft and after it as well on YouTube/NBC Sports. Enjoy the first round next Thursday night.